The next thing to learn is ribbing. This is where you alternate knit and purl stitches within a row. What is it and when to use it? Let's look at some samples and figure that out together. So first I want to talk about these mitts and show you just the ribbing across the top. Ribbing is wonderful for finishing edgings, and we have, you can see here, the knit stitch and the purl stitch, and you just alternate those going across the rows. The rib is great for finishing off things because it lays flat, so there isn't kind of a rolling or any kind of distortion at the ends of things, so it's a nice flat edging. It's also reversible, so it's exactly the same on both sides, which is really nice too. Also, it can kind of cinch in the fabric a little bit, so if it's used at the top of a sock, like the cuff of a sock, or the bottom of a sweater, it's kind of nice sometimes to have a little bit of cinching in of the fabric. It's used in things like socks, like I mentioned, the top of a sock, that's where you see ribbing a lot of times, and that really helps to hold the sock up because it does kind of pull that fabric in a little bit. So I have a mitten here too, and you can really see kind of on this one how the fabric gets kind of pulled in, and that's always really nice to have on a cuff of a mitten. Here's a great example of a hat, and you can see that the ribbing here is really long, and it's also cuffed up for this hat here in the bottom section, but then up at the top, this section of ribbing is more just decorative to kind of have an interesting stitch texture in the hat and change things up a little bit, and it makes it fun to kind of throw in different stitch patterns while you're working on a project like this. So this example has a 1-by-1 rib, so that means you do one knit stitch and one purl stitch, and then you just keep repeating that around. The other examples I showed you have the 2-by-2 rib, and it does give a little bit of a different appearance. And then one of the main things that you see ribbing used for is sweater knitting, which is such a great fun project. But a lot of sweaters, even store-bought sweaters, a lot of times have a ribbing on the edging, and that's another great place that you can use some ribbing. So let me show you how to actually knit the rib. To do the rib stitch, we're going to do the knit 2, purl 2 across the row. So to start, you're going to have that yarn in the back and under the left needle, and you're going to start with the knit stitch. So we can see here I have those V's under the stitches on the needle, and that tells me I need to do the knit stitch first. So I'm going to go ahead and start to do the knit stitch. Remember, you insert the needle from the left to the right to the back, and then you're going to go around and get a little tension on your yarn, pull the stitch through, and take it off the needle. So we're going to do 2 of those knit stitches. Now for the rib stitch, you did the 2 and you want to do purl stitches now. So you need to bring that yarn in between the needles and to the front, and then you're going to go ahead and do the purl stitch for 2 stitches with the yarn in the front. So you go through the stitch from the right to the left and take that stitch off the needle, bring the yarn in between the needles and to the back again. Now I'm back to my knit stitches. Now if you lose track of where you are, you're going to want to just take a look at the stitch. Now remember, the purl stitch has those bumps that are right under the stitch on the needle. So now I know I have to purl. So I'm going to bring my yarn back into the front, bring it in between the needles and to the front, and then I'm going to do the 2 purl stitches. Now let's say you're doing your first row of ribbing, and you won't have those stitches underneath to kind of check where you are, but what you can always do if you're just starting is you can look at the stitches you've already knit. So I can see here I did 2 of those knit stitches with the V's, and here I did 2 of the purl stitches. So now I know that I need to do 2 of the knit stitches. It just alternates 2 knit and then 2 purl. Remember to bring your yarn to the front every time you're going to do a purl and go up, up and over. It's actually kind of fun to get to change stitches in the same row. It keeps you entertained, and it helps you to kind of concentrate and focus on what you're doing. So I'm coming to the front. So the biggest thing about the rib stitch is that you're just remembering to bring the yarn to the front of the work, and then you go to the back. So it's a lot of kind of back and forth with that working yarn. There you go, you finished the first row here, and I just want to take a minute to look here. So we finished with purl 2. So when I turn around to go back for the next row of my ribbing on this side, so it's purl 2 on the other side, this side it's knit stitches. So I'm going to start with the knit stitches. Now when you're working back, what you're going to do is once you've established that pattern of knits and purls on the way back, you're always just going to be knitting the knit stitches and purling the purl stitches. So here I would start with knit 2. Now I say I have 2 purls, so I go purl 2, knit 2, purl 2. So it's good to identify those stitches, and one kind of fun way to think about those stitches is that the knit stitch is like a V-neck. It's like a V-neck shirt, and the purl stitches are like a turtleneck because they're 2 little rings right around the bottom of the stitch there. So we have V-necks for knits and turtlenecks for purl stitches. So that's a cute way to keep track of your stitches.